Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Krieger, and I will present you in this episode about the people-oriented energy transition, access to complexity, and necessity of communication. I was holding this presentation for the University of Nanjing in China on 5th November 2023. What is the current situation when we talk about the energy transition in Germany? For sure, we all saw the Russian invasion in Ukraine last spring, and Germany totally changed its energy supply. So we no longer import any Russian gas. Nevertheless, we also shut down all our nuclear power plants, and the renewables are only at around 50% of energy production so far. So we have to get the other 50% into the future. The rest of the energy production is coal, gas, and imports, especially from France and Poland at the moment. And there were a lot of amendments of laws in Germany to increase the installation of renewables. Around 60 laws were amended. Also, there are some European legislation we have to focus on, which abandons some regulations, especially on nature conservation parts. But I will leave out this for this presentation, as it is not necessary to understand what I want to say. So energy transition is a very complex field. If you think, for example, about the technical issues, you have installed capacity, Hertz fluctuation within the grid, you have to focus on all the different parts. And energy transition is made by professionals, but it's still told to be citizen run because energy transition started around 30 years ago in Germany, was really increasing with the installation, especially in small wind power plants and photovoltaics. And we still see that in the energy transition, but there are huge companies at the moment who took over a part of the market, not all of it, and still running and telling the people that it is a citizen-run, a citizen-run transition. The energy transition is highly regulated by law. I said that 60 laws were amended throughout the last year. And you see, I gave you some overviews, voluntary subsidiaries, mandatory procedures, permissions, and public participation, which are all regulated by law. And you have to understand the law to understand the energy transition. Energy transition is also interdependent, which means that the renewables don't exist by itself. So the energy has to be used somewhere at home. I'm now at home. You can see the lights in the background. I'm using energy right now. And you have to think of all the part of the energy production process, which makes it very necessary to understand the technical issues of how the photovoltaic power plant 20 kilometers away from Berlin, where I am at the moment, is producing the energy and delivering it to my place where I'm using it right now. To understand this is quite complex. And this is all about complexity is a necessary part of the energy transition. You can make things simpler to understand general links between all the different parts. But if you make it simple, you leave out a lot of parts. So it is not about simplification to bring complexity to the people. You have to make a complexity accessible. What does this mean? So complexity is a part of our daily life. Everybody has some issues which are very complex to understand. It can be technical, it can be philosophical, can be social, can be in our families, can be with our friends. So everybody knows about complexity. And how do you make it accessible to people? So it's not about making it simple, it's making an access to the different parts. So you have to understand the complexity of the energy transition, and therefore you have to understand the different perspectives you can have on energy transition. So everybody's looking at us quite different to certain parts of the energy transition, and to understand their point of view, it's very necessary to get the access to that. So if people are empowered by getting access to the energy transition, they are more constructive, they are more supportive, even more, they can participate several times within the energy transition. So you're building a wind park on the one side and a solar park on the other side. And if you make the access to the project, to the complexity of a wind power park, you also get the access for the people to the solar power park on the opposite side. Don't forget that. You don't have to start at every single point from the beginning like you have to do if it's too simple. If you make it accessible, if you teach the people, then you can bring them from the one project to the other project. And they become multiplicators with that. So it makes sense to talk about complexity. The challenge is to start with the right person, because not everybody is at the same starting point. You have to think about that. And you have to think about the right complexity of which is available. So different parts. The one is more focusing on the legal aspects, the other is more focusing on the technical aspects. You have to think about these different perspectives, and you have to teach the right way. And that brings us to the second part of this presentation, to the communication. So energy transition is too complex to be understood. It's a little bit of the opposition of what I already said. But if you think about, like I said, the light in the background is now on, so energy is produced somewhere and I can use it. But it starts further in the beginning, like we have the climate change on the one side, we have the energy supply on the other side, and we have noise emissions, we have all different parts, we have conflicts, we need some space where we can build the energy transition power plants. And to understand this, it takes some time. So you don't have to bring too much information to the people, but the right information to the people. So you have to know their point of view. There are several points of the people which can have on the energy transition. It can be supportive, like I am. It can be opposition. I'm against all of it. I am neutral. So tell me about it. I will see where I am, and I'm uninterested. So I just switch on the lights, but that's how I think about the energy transition. There are different narratives which can be used to understand the energy transition. There are supportive narratives like climate change, energy supply, or justice for future generations. And there are also narratives who are opposing energy transition, like landscape destruction, health issues, political fraud, or alternatives discussion. And there are a lot more for sure. You have heard about it. So when it comes to communication and people need explanations without being explanatory because they already understand a lot. I mean, it's not magic what we are talking about. It's a thing you can understand if you communicate the right way. The right communication is more listening than speaking. It's one of the key factors. I will come to the point at the very last part of this presentation. So the necessity of communication, which is said, find the right spot, etc. So communication is key for all stakeholders, but it depends on the subject. Like I said, there are different people looking on different perspectives on the energy transition. So therefore, you have to have a suitable narrative where you start, where you talk about energy transition, where you listen to the people and to bring in the different perspectives the people have. So people who understand the message, we are talking about a message, communication is all about bringing up a message. They can connect to it. And if they're connected to the message, they spread the message. So they are, again, multiplicators, like we said, with the complexity. If you make complexity accessible, the people become multiplicators to talk about this complexity. So even more, the people anticipate the message and make it to their own message. So they are talking about the thing you would like to talk about with their own words. Perfect if you want the acceptance for all the projects you're doing. And this is, in fact, another form of message. So the challenge within this is to find the right time for communication, because you can communicate too early or too late. So think about that. Maybe earlier is better than late. On the one side, communicate the right thing. So are we talking about the climate change, or are we talking about the specific power plant? Or are we talking about what the community or what the municipality can do with the money they are gaining out of this? Different parts, different things, different kind of communication. And what are you communicating to which stakeholder group? So maybe nature conservation parties need different information or communication than people who live around the site. And this brings me to the last thing, the seven steps of a dialogue as a solution. First, identification of the right people. Who are the stakeholders you are talking to? Be neutral or hire someone who is reliable neutral. Why? You go there and you want to build something which is from outside. You're not part of the community, you're not part of the municipality, you are from another place. So if you hire someone who is in between you and the people there or the stakeholder there, that opens an atmosphere of trust. Why does it do that? Because the person who goes there, the dialogue manager, for example, he or she can talk to the people in a very different way. because he or she can focus on emotions, which you never can as a projector or as someone who is building up the wind farm there. And with the emotions, you bring up access to complexity and you communicate by emotions. So third is then do an analysis of the needs and demands of the stakeholders, which is very necessary because then you're building up a strategy to address but the content and format which are interdependent. So if you are focusing on an information campaign, then the format would be, for example, a video call or a podium discussion. If you're focusing more on what different solutions can we find together, it's more a workshop. Think about that. And the fifth step is participate the stakeholders. Real participation does not mean just to inform them. You also listen to them, the most necessary thing. It brings me to the sixth point. Listen instead of answering. Ask more questions. And if they say something, say yes. And like you already know, maybe from theater, where it's a technique to keep the things running. So even if you disagree with what they said, you can say yes and add another idea, and then you can manage the communication in a part that the narrative is changing from opposition to supportive. Think about that. And last, show action. If you tell the people, I will do that, do that. And that's all about complexity and communication within the energy transition. Thank you very much. Click on the QR code if you want to have all the information down there to contact me. Thank you. Bye-bye.